Hi everybody, nice to see you all again. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'd like to talk about one of the classic and most notorious problems that many people encounter in English pronunciation. I'm talking about what we in phonetics call the dental fricatives in English. That is th and the. Yes, these two fricatives, the voiceless dental fricative, th, and the voiced dental fricative, the, create lots and lots of problems for lots and lots of different people because they are very uncommon sounds that most languages do not have. So today I'd like to spend just a little bit of time talking about these two sounds. The first thing I should say is that if you can't produce these two sounds, you shouldn't worry about it too much. We are very, very accustomed to non-native speakers of English not being able to produce them properly. If we take, for example, th, the voiceless dental fricative, we are very used to the fact that some people will take that sound and turn it into s. I think that that's very stereotypical perhaps of a French accent, but that is the reality. People who cannot produce these sounds accurately will tend to turn them into s or t if we're talking about the voiceless dental fricative, th, and they will turn them into z or d if we're talking about the voiced dental fricative, the. We are very used to that. We've all heard it 10,000 times from all sorts of different non-natives, so it is not going to create any problems of comprehension for us on the whole. Even if you can produce this sound slowly, carefully, think in that sort of fashion, it is entirely possible that you're not capable of producing these sounds accurately in real time when you have to speak relatively quickly. That's another problem here, another problem that means that it is not necessarily worth the time and effort you might put into it, into this task of trying to learn to pronounce these sounds accurately. The place where you should perhaps try and, this is a tricky one, the place where you should perhaps think a bit harder about sounds like this is when they come in or close to word final position, when they come towards the end of a syllable, not towards the beginning. If you take, for example, the word month, then you need to learn somehow to pronounce the word months, which is a very difficult word to pronounce for many people because you have a 3-consonant consonant cluster at the end of that word. Things like that are very difficult for many people to pronounce. Also, if you take the word moth, for example, you would like to be able to say moths. I'm pronouncing it very carefully there. It won't always be that clear. If we're speaking quickly, we say, oh, we've got a couple of moths in here, You might not be able to hear the difference between that and moss, but there is a difference. Oh, we've got a couple of moths in here. It's very quick. We do that very quickly, and it's very difficult to learn to do. But that said, even in contexts like that, context itself will usually make it clear what you're talking about. And you cannot slow down and start worrying or panicking every time you have to use one of these sounds. Of course, there are there are a certain number of very important function words in English that begin with the voiced dental fricative, the, there, this, that, those, these, therefore, etc., etc. These words, there aren't that many of these words, but they're used all the time. They're used very frequently. Think of the words I just said. The, this, that, those, these, there. These are very, very common words. So you really cannot allow yourself to get into a position in which you're worrying every time you have to use one of them. You're just going to have to use whichever pronunciation comes to you most naturally and persevere with that. If you can pronounce these sounds the way we do, that's fantastic. But it's worth bearing in mind that there are lots of native dialects of the English language in the British Isles, including Ireland, which is not in Britain. In those dialects, these sounds are not produced the way I would produce them. You can take two examples. You can take the standard Irish accent, in which thin is going to be pronounced as something like tin. It's quite tin. Over there. You get that over there, that kind of thing they say in Ireland. Tree. I want 3 pints of Guinness. I hope that doesn't sound too stereotypical. Irish people do in fact speak like that, more or less. Also the Cockney accent is another classic example. My mother, with a V instead of the, as I would pronounce it, mother. You also get fin, or for example think, think with an F, f. This is very common, and although these pronunciations may be stigmatized to some extent, that is a socio-linguistic reality. The fact of the matter is that these are perfectly legitimate pronunciations within the speech communities in question. So if the natives can get away with pronouncing stuff like this, you can probably do it too in one fashion or another. So whatever your language background is, I promise you there are lots of far more important things to be focusing on as you try and improve your English pronunciation. And we'll be talking about lots of those different things as we make our way through the various videos that I wish to make on this channel. So yes, try and pronounce these sounds correctly, i.e. the standard way. And if you can do that, that's absolutely fantastic. But if you can't do it, then don't worry about it too much, because it's not as important as you might think. And to the extent that you have time and energy available to be working on your English pronunciation, I promise you there are far more important things to be working on. That's all for now. Just wanted to set your minds at rest a little bit if you've ever had any concerns about this. Thanks very much for listening, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.